Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Services Committee meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Calling this meeting of the Public Services Committee to order Tuesday, March 12th, 2013 at 5:25. First item on the agenda will be review and approval of minutes dated February 12th, 2013. Do we have any comments or
Move to
motions?
approve, Rupenbeck.
Second, Karski.
All right, we have a motion and it has been seconded. With that, we will ask for a vocal approval. All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, that does pass 4-0. Next item on the agenda will be naming rights ordinance. We will have our city attorney, David Fifley, give us some updates on that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Fifley with the City Attorney's Office. Sorry about that. As you'll recall, several months ago, we had reviewed a model ordinance that had been adopted by the City of Omaha regarding naming rights for various city properties and facilities. As you'll recall, our current ordinance merely states that the council will approve naming rights for a city building, and then it lists or enumerates the exact city buildings that are subject to that ordinance. Over the years, naming rights opportunities have been expanding greatly across the country, and we've seen here in the city that through your efforts that naming rights are expanding at a great rate, even for city opportunities right here in Sioux Falls. This proposed ordinance that's in front of you is modeled after the Omaha ordinance, and I'll just go through the few tweaks that are unique to Sioux Falls. This ordinance, as it's proposed, recognizes that expansion of naming rights opportunities. And thanks to Councilor Anderson's leadership, we shared this Omaha model ordinance with the other city departments and with also the affected stakeholders, including the zoo and the pavilion. And we have taken their input and fashioned what we believe is a good proposal going forward on how to make this have standards, have council oversight and approval, yet also don't, in other words, micromanage some of the more minor issues that may come up regarding naming rights for very small portions and what have you. First, the tweaked model was posted on SIRE this afternoon, so I apologize that it didn't get to you folks beforehand, but frankly, the tweaks are all in that one paragraph where it defines fixtures. Fixture in law is pretty well defined. It's something affixed to the land, meaning something bolted down, something a part of the real estate, part of the building. The ordinance now really doesn't have anything for if you want to name a portion of a building, if you want to name, say, a plaza or a courtyard or something like that, and it really left a gaping hole in your oversight of those types of naming opportunities. And what this does is it specifically states that a fixture would be covered by the naming rights ordinance as proposed, and it would cover interior rooms, walls, monuments, courtyards, or plazas. In talking with the affected stakeholders, we realized so often naming opportunities, commemorative issues are done via plaques or pavers in the ground. Park benches are even actually something that are technically affixed to the ground because often they're bolted into a bolt in the cement to the park. So based on those suggestions, this new proposal would have those specific items excluded. Obviously, we have so many requests to name park benches and so forth, and talking with Councilor Anderson, just the belief was at some point we don't need to have you folks approving every park bench and every engraved paver and so forth. It would become too insurmountable of a task. The proposal recognized the importance of certain boards have already been involved in the naming process and some of the standards that have already been established by ordinance. For instance, the street naming function is already in ordinance. Under the subdivision ordinance, there are some standards for street naming, and it should be noted that in a lot of instances, street names are just where the street is extended. So and then there's some other standards, and those are all enforced by the engineering division. And the belief was, since the ordinance is specific to that naming function, we can probably, for the most part, leave that alone, except have some renaming opportunities for commemorative and et cetera. The Parks Board is still serving in their advisory role regarding the naming of parks or major portions of the parks. Then the Library Board would still be recommending library names to you folks for final approval by the whole council. But the proposal creates a city naming committee, kind of a catch-all committee where one of those other either library, parks, or streets aren't covered. So we have it for just about anywhere else. If someone wanted to name a courtyard somewhere other than in a park, some other city property, we'd have a city committee, the naming committee. It would establish a centralized filing area where the planning department would create an application form. There would be established a naming rights committee, and that would include the city planning director as the chairperson of that committee, and then it lists four other city directors that would be involved, and then also it would involve 3 citizens to be appointed with the advice and consent of the council, and that would provide citizen input. And this would just provide kind of a first layer of general input, information gathering, and so forth, so that whether it's, say, Park Board, Library Board, or the City Naming Rights Committee, they're all providing information and input to you folks and ensuring that the standards as provided in this ordinance are being followed in order to have that naming rights. The standards for naming or commemorative naming are fairly similar in standard in most areas. There are slight variations depending on whether it's a naming or a commemorative naming, but just overall, if it's a naming, it's going to require ultimately a public hearing in front of the council, and it's going to require by ordinance. Ordinance means something that's adopted that's permanent. The naming of some type of city property is a legislative function where you folks by ordinance are saying this is going to be the name of that place or fixture. A commemorative naming is only going to require a resolution, but it would also require a public hearing. And as you're aware, in your council meetings, whether it's an ordinance or a resolution, you have a public hearing before that's adopted. So not only are you getting public input via either citizen boards that are involved with making the recommendation to you, or the City Naming Rights Committee that would have 3 members of the public on it, but you're also having a chance for public input and a public hearing in front of the council before a final name would be established and adopted. The commemorative renaming does require, say, the prepayment of the signs and the plaques before they would be installed. It also has an application fee of $100. For the other naming rights applications, we did not include a fee, but on purpose, we're leaving that up to you folks if you think there should be a fee or not. And with that, I think I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Okay, questions from the committee? Councilman Urfelbach?
I'm trying to figure out what commemorative renaming would be so that a street or whatever would still be named whatever, Phillips Avenue, and then it's commemorative name. Any examples? Can you guys think of this somewhere? I don't know that we have any in Sioux Falls, but it's...
I can't think of one in Sioux Falls, Councilor Erpenbach, off the top of my head, but yeah, commemorative naming doesn't change the official name, but you just have a plaque or, you know, an approved sign that says the Erpenbach Way instead of Phillips Avenue, for instance.
Well, I'm trying to think about like yeah, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it? I know that's what that look was about. Think about East 10th Street, where it becomes Arrowhead Parkway. Would that be something like this?
That's an official street name that it changes.
Oh.
I forget, is it at
At a certain
Sycamore,
point?
I believe, the intersection with Sycamore, that changes?
There's some hooligan in the backyard.
Counselor who would like to
Would
public
it be,
testimony?
would it be like Interstate 90, I believe, is
The Blue Star.
Gold Star Freeway or something like
Or
that?
you adopt a highway?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
no,
think
it is. It's a commemorative name for military. The Blue Star
military-
Highways.
Blue
Yep,
Star
you're right.
Highway, yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. No, I
Or
get it
Purple,
now.
or is it Purple
Thank
Heart
you.
Highway or something like that? Yeah.
Right, yep,
Yeah.
you're right. Okay, good, thank you. That was really the only one I couldn't figure out.
Any other, Councilman Karski?
Kind of stuck on the application process that goes along with this, and, you know, the Veterans Administration wants to rename it the, you know, Blue Star Highway or the Purple Heart Highway or whatever. Why do we need an application fee?
That's in your discretion. Again, that was in the Omaha ordinance, the $100 application fee, and it's totally up to you folks what you want to do with that.
If I can say
If-
something on that
I'm sorry,
too,
go
is,
ahead.
when we looked at that, we really struggled with that also, and we left it out. We figured that would be something that could be discussed at a committee level, and if it had to go further, then we could also bring it to an informational and discuss that also. So, I mean, whether or not we have a fee or not will be decided here by us.
Okay. I'll go on record as being, I don't think it's necessary.
Can I spin it just
Councilperson
conversation-wise?
Offenbach?
Think about then, I don't want to pick on the VA, but let's say they want to name 22nd Street from Western to Kiwanis, Blue Star Street in Sioux Falls. We want to make sure that they're serious about doing it and that it's a legitimate thing, plus we're going to have to put some staff time into it. Does that cover the $100? I mean, is that something that we would think about, or do we care? I'm not arguing either way. I'm just wondering if that's part of why we might have a fee, to make it legitimate and to cover our costs.
Councilman Aguilar?
But would our costs be covered as far as the new signage or the commemorative signage? Is that in there?
Yes, Counselor. I think Counselor Erpenbach's getting to, I think, the grounds for the fee is the staff time and so forth.
Right. Because they have to pay for the signage, right?
Yep. It has to be paid before they would be installed, so it's in there.
I don't care either way.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. You could have any group say, hey, come before the council, say, I want to rename, you know, this Independence Way, or, you know, we have a, pick a person's name and say, I just think it'd be a great idea if we rename this street in this park or this swimming pool, you know, whatever, but I still think it's a stretch. I don't think we're going to see a lot of people doing that. I mean, you would eliminate that, obviously, by doing that, but we could always go back, and if we're getting a lot of these types of things, we could always go back and do it. But most of these things are done to honor somebody, and that's why they're commemorative, and I don't think we're going to see people coming up with any sort of fringe naming requests. I mean, anything's possible, but yeah.
Could we make the fee basically like a deposit, that if you're accepted, that fee would be used to offset the markers or the signs that were being placed? That way they do show an interest by placing that deposit, and then that deposit can be rolled over to help pay for signage. And if not, then it can, you know, if it doesn't go through, it can be refunded.
What's the line?
I
Skin
mean,
in
if
the
it doesn't
game?
go through, they don't, they don't get it back.
They don't lose anything.
Well, no.
It depends on if you want that to be a non-refundable deposit, or it could be refunded if they were denied.
And that would be defeating the purpose of requiring the deposit. I think if you're going to require a deposit, it is non-refundable, and it is used for it. Otherwise, again, you could go back and be dealing with, you get one, you're going to get a lot of them. So if it's non-refundable, that would make more sense.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Can we talk about it some more? Any other ideas?
Sure.
Yeah. So you're talking, are you talking about it being a deposit? They put $100 down, and then if you read, let's see where I'm at, section 30.006, commemorative renaming, and look at subsection D, the applicant pays for the signs, and the signs will not be made and installed until payment is received. Does that mean the city is making the signs so that they
Yes.
meet our requirements or whatever?
Unless other arrangements are made for
Because
someone
they
else
want the
to make
plaque to
sign.
be bronze at the beginning of the Independence Way or whatever. Yeah, okay.
But how does that, excuse me, how does that work with like the pavilion and, you know, the naming of different,
These are only streets, right? Oh,
That's
no.
commemorative naming. Those would be naming rights, say if you're going to do a fixture or something at the pavilion, then that's not involved. The commemorative designation is where you're requiring the signs to be paid
but,
for.
so do they have to make application? I mean, how does it come to us from the recommendation from the park board, or, you know, it says that the park board is going to make a recommendation, say, on the Great Plains Zoo, if they're going to, because they're trying to raise money usually for a naming right. Do they have to make application after that recommendation has come? How does that work? What's the process?
Something is going to be subject to the naming, then you'd have an application that you'd get a form from the planning director. Then you need to file it with the planning director. Then he or she would either take it to the city naming committee or one of the other boards that already is involved with naming input to you folks. They would do their due diligence, and then it would go on to you, and it would be placed on the agenda either as a proposed resolution or a proposed ordinance, depending on if it's commemorative, it'd be resolution. If it's a naming, then it would be by ordinance.
And so for those, there are no application fees?
No, there's no application
Okay.
fee for those.
It's just the commemorative?
The Omaha ordinance had a $1,000 application fee for the naming. With the chairman's input, that was quickly deleted, if I may say that.
I think if I can join in here, we had meetings with the pavilion and with the zoo organizations, and really sat down with them, discussed over how this process would work. And I think we came to a very good conclusion with both organizations. When we left, they were both happy with the powers that they still have. But it's more of, what we set up is more of a communication process where we're now made aware of these potential naming rights or these changes that they want to make on public property. And there was no source of information before that. Councilperson Urfenbach.
If you go to section 30.065, City Council disposition, it's right above what we were just talking about. It talks about, third sentence, City Council shall thereafter by ordinance approve, deny, or approve with conditions. Wouldn't those conditions then be Hy-Vee paid X amount of dollars and the Hy-Vee face-to-face farm or whatever, that's one of the conditions, is that it's a naming right? Is that, am I interpreting that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's where you go with it. I like this a lot, if I can give my
So do I.
opinion.
Okay, so taking a look at this, do we have any motions as far as application fee or any motions to
I'm
move
going to
this
move to
along?
strike then. On 30.006, subsection A, the last sentence, the application shall be accompanied by an application fee of $100.
I'll second that.
Strike that.
All right. You got that? Okay. We do have a motion with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that passes 4-0. And that is an amendment onto that. So now do we have any motion on moving this forward, or is this something that still needs to be discussed? Councilperson
Madam
Aguilar?
I move that we move this forward to the council for consideration.
Second, Erpenbach.
All right, that also has a motion and been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, then this also moves to the city council.
Sweet. Nice work. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for following up with this.
Good work.
Next on the agenda, we have open discussion. Do we have any items for open discussion at this time? Councilperson Aguilar.
Could you update us as far as where we're going with the taxi cab issue?
Thank you. Yes, at this time, there has been a task force created within the administration to take a look at the taxi cab ordinance. After our first meeting, there's been a finding that the ordinance is very much lacking. And at this time, we are having the city attorney's office with our licensing clerk and the police department go over the ordinance as far as the communication between departments and just looking at the full ordinance. And basically the belief is that with the changes over the last 10 years in not only the number of cabs, but the differences in the cabs as far as, you know, the larger companies, individual companies, charging one rate, then you have your party buses and different things like that, that we are going to take a look with the administration through the entire ordinance, and we'll be back sometime, I would expect, in April or May with those revisions, and we'll bring them here for a presentation.
Great.
Thank you. Great.
Councilman Karski?
Along the same line, in addressing the taxi cab ordinance and the sprinkler requirements, we basically have two task forces out there. Are you able to name the members of the people that are working with you on those task forces?
Not off the top of my head. If you would like a list, we can provide that for you.
It'd be interesting.
We have, if you would please give your name.
Jim David, City Council staff. The taxi group, I would call it more of a working group, not a task force. It's staff that are working on it. Right now, it's the city attorney's office and the police department are going to look at that ordinance, possibly look at consolidating responsibilities under one department. That's one of the options that they're looking at, but also looking at some of the other ordinances. Again, I know that the council and this committee had looked at St. Paul, Lincoln, Des Moines, and some of the others, but they're going to go outside of that and look at other opportunities for the taxi ordinance. The sprinkler group, I can forward the names on that task force. That is an actual task force group. In fact, they're going to be meeting for the first time on Thursday to review whether or not to require sprinklers in buildings or multifamily structures 3 to 16 units. But that includes representatives from architectural firms, from multi-housing association, and others. But I definitely can forward that on to you.
Councilman Karski?
When we did the urban ag meetings, we had them very public, public input. Do you know what the process is going to be for this?
Yeah, the first meeting is going to be on Thursday in the morning. It's going to be in Carnegie Town Hall and Council Chamber, just because it was conducive for public input. A press release has gone out on that. There's an agenda out on SIRE. We're going to be looking at when to have them, try to have some consistency in those meeting dates and times. It looks like Thursday will definitely be the day that we will meet, but we'll be looking at, do we have it after hours, because that, as you remember, in the Urban Ag Task Force, it was beneficial to sometimes do it during the day, but also doing it in the evening to allow for the most possible public input. So,
Councilor Aguilar?
So this will come back after the task force to the committee?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add to that too, with the sprinkler ordinance, I have spoken with the Multi-Housing Association, who will be part of the task force, and our fire chief, and I am very hopeful that there will be something coming out of that so that we can move forward with the sprinkler ordinance in Sioux Falls. It's something that has waited very long to be upgraded. I think that between the groups, that they will come up with something that will be acceptable. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.